This is our reading today about Ernest Shackleton. It's from this book, Against All Odds. I'm reading from a couple of pages in, page 6, which is where your information is from. In August 1914, British explorer Ernest Shackleton had almost finished preparing for an organised journey or expedition to Antarctica. 2.5 years earlier, Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen had reached the furthest point south, the South Pole. He had beaten British explorer Robert Fulton Scott by just over a month. This journey cost Scott and the other members of his party their lives. Shackleton had known Scott well. He had gone with Scott on an earlier expedition. Later he had returned, leading his own expedition, and tried but failed to reach the South Pole. Now he had a new plan. The purpose of his new expedition was to walk from one side of Antarctica to the other. It was a distance of around 3,000 kilometres. Shackleton was a good leader. He was well liked and respected by his men. He had much experience of Antarctica, but he could never have imagined just how much this journey would test him. By the time it was over, it would rank as one of the greatest survival stories of all time. The whalers told Shackleton that the ice in the summer of 1914 was the worst they had ever seen in the Weddell Sea. It would be impossible, they said, to get to Antarctica. But on December 5, Shackleton and his crew set out for their destination of Vassal Bay. By December 7th, they had found the pack ice. At first it was only light, but the explorers soon came to a thick ice floe more than 1/4 of a kilometre wide. As they went on, the number of ice floes increased, but Frank Worsley, the ship's captain, managed to navigate his way through until January 18, when, around 300 kilometres from Vassal Bay, the crew tried to push through a kind of thick, mushy ice that they had not seen before. It closed around the ship like glue as the moving floes slowly hemmed her in. Shackleton decided to wait for a while to see if the pack would open up again. But the pack would not open again. Endurance had come to her final resting place. Now the crew were at the mercy of the pack ice, not knowing how far it would carry them and their ship, or for how long. In fact, it was carrying them towards Vassal Bay, but by February they were only 100 kilometres away. But it would be impossible to carry all their supplies over the ice, and there might be open water on the way. They would have to stay with the ship. Shackleton knew if the ice did not release them soon, they would have to stay for a long time. Summer was slipping away and the temperatures were dropping. When the winter came, they would not be able to continue the expedition. They would have to spend the winter on the pack ice waiting for spring. The ice did not release the Endurance, and the crew had no choice but to wait out the dark winter. In the polar regions, the sun does not rise during winter at all. This is called the polar night. It would be a long time before the men saw daylight again. February slid into March, then April and May. Finally, at the end of July, they saw the sun again for 1 minute at noon and knew that the polar night was ending and summer was on the way. However, the ice showed no signs of releasing them. In fact, it got worse, tightening its hold on the ship until, on the afternoon of October the 24th, a huge wave of pressure rippled through the ice and pushed shards of ice through her side. Icy water poured into the hold. Caught firmly in the ice, Endurance did not sink, but as the pressure rose and rose, she slowly began to break up. Finally, gazing at the wreck of his ship, Shackleton knew that she was finished. Now the men had no option but to leave the ship that had been their home for so many months. And there's a very famous picture of the Endurance there being crushed in the ice.